Добрий день.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. We start our operation today. It's year 9 of the war and day 295 of the heroic resistance of the Ukrainian people. My name is Olga Atamanova, and our brief schedule prepared by our team for today, we will at 14 o'clock at 16 o'clock we will have Mikita Potorayev joining us. He's the chair of Humanitarian and Information Policy Committee of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, and we will talk about the adoption of the draft law on media. And at 16:30 joining us online will be Vadim Pristaiko, Ukraine's extraordinary and plenipotentiary ambassador to the United Kingdom, and we will be talking about the support provided by the United Kingdom to Ukraine. And joining us right now is Vasyl Furmanm, Deputy Chairman of the Board of National Bank of Ukraine. Good afternoon, Mr. Vasyl. Good afternoon. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Let's start our conversation with the stability of the banking system. How will our banking system cope with the challenges existing for today within the last 10 months of the war? Thank you for your question. I would like to say that I'm the member of the board of the National Bank of Ukraine, and I will be expressing my personal opinion answering your questions. So talking about the operation of the banking system, the full-scale war of Russia against Ukraine will have long consequences for financial sector, but thanks to the professional actions of the National Bank of Ukraine and the banking system in general, we still keep our defense positions. In no country of the world we could witness the 24/7 stable operation of the banking system. We were able to avoid the uncontrolled inflation, devaluation, and thanks to the timely fixation of the exchange rate, there is still pressure on the exchange rate. It's not as big as it was back in June, July, but it still exists. This is why National Bank performs interventions for buying out the foreign currency, and also National Bank of Ukraine raised the interest rate to make the hryvnia deposits more attractive to the people. And in my opinion, as an expert, we implemented the transmission mechanism, which would allow us to avoid many negative factors influencing the rate of hryvnia, the exchange rate. The situation in the currency market is currently controlled. As of today, the amount of deposits reached the pre-war level, and as to the banks, they entered the crisis with the huge liquidity reserves. Everybody had emergency action plans, and the trust to the banks during these last days is already growing. We could say the residues of capital as of December, we had plus 245 billion hryvnias. Those are the deposits of the individuals and businesses in the banking system, which grew lately. The deposits of the individuals grew 37%, and the deposits of businesses grew 11% within the last 3 months. Still, there is a financing required for different industries, such as, for example, agriculture. The mass lending to the business is currently only possible with the government support. If we look, for example, at absolute or relative indicators of lending, the general summary could be. So if we talk about the lending to retail, the lending decreased a little bit more than 12% or 29 billion hryvnia as of 9th December, comparing to the 24th of February. It's a different comparison basis, which may demonstrate different figures. If we look at corporate segment, as of 9th of December, the lending grew 4% or 18 billion hryvnia. In corporate segment, the currency lending fell. And during the martial law, the 5-7 within the program of 579 program, the banks lended 16,000 credits to the businesses, and the credit risk still remains a key issue for the banks, and its realization is still the major threat to the sector. The businesses currently bear losses. According to the estimates of the National Bank of Ukraine, the banks will lose about 20% of their lending portfolio during the war. The non-performing loans as of the 1st of November is 35.5%, comparing to the 1st of March this year. If we see the scale of the non-performing loans in the system, it grew 112 billion hryvnias. If we see the general results, the credible banks received the net profit 77 billion hryvnias more comparing to the last year, which is 107 billion hryvnias. So we can say that operationally the banking system remains profitable. According to the evaluation of the National Bank of Ukraine, the major financial institutions of the country maintain normal capital adequacy rate and are able to renew their capital upon the transition from the crisis stage. We don't know when the war will end, but I can tell you for sure that the banking system is ready for any challenges, and we will further on continue maintaining and keeping the financial defense of our country. We appreciate your positive forecast, and we would like to ask about our foreign loans. How did our debts, how did the dynamic change starting from the full-scale invasion, and how much of those debts fall on one single Ukrainian? Thank you for your question. It's an interesting question. In terms of the debt, it's important to monitor the dynamics, because if we calculate both internal and external debt, so it amounts generally to $103 billion. But as of 1st of January, the debt amounted to $98 billion. So within the last year, well, in complete year, it grew like 5%. So again, we have to monitor the dynamics. If we see the debt back in 2017, it amounted to, in dollars, I mean, it's $66 billion. And comparing to today's 103, so we see that it's a 35% growth. It's the 5-year dynamics. Thank you, Mr. Vasyl. We understand that notwithstanding anything, the holidays are coming, and usually during this period our currency rate starts fluctuating. What are your expectations for the currency rate fluctuations this year? Well, let's be honest. On one hand, we as a national bank does not or provide this specific forecast for the holidays, but we've seen some research of Ukrainian analysts and foreign analysts, and they evaluate Ukrainian hryvnia as a relatively stable currency. So again, thanks to the professional activities of the National Bank of Ukraine, it's the informative banking system, and again, it's the huge support of our international partners. So our macroeconomic indicators comparing with others. All right, let's be honest. Today we have a 27% inflation, but in some countries which are not in war, they have inflation at the same level. For example, in Poland, inflation rate is 17%. So it's a pretty good indicator for Ukraine, and I hope it will reach its maximum point and then it will decrease. So National Bank forecasts the inflation to decrease next year. Well, we had a forecast of more than 20% inflation this year, which was relatively precise. But again, we understand that the war influences Ukrainian economy in a negative way, but according to the hryvnia rate, the situation, I think, will remain stable, and I hope that the next year the amount of external foreign financial support will be growing, because we will have to renew the economy. The monetary policy of the National Bank will not change a lot, so we will be able to finance the budget expenditures, which will positively influence the rate of Ukrainian hryvnia. Thank you, sir. Dear colleagues, if you have any questions, please go ahead. Oksana Polishuk, Ukrinform. Could you please tell us what will be the destiny of Forward Bank and Alpha Bank? We know that they have issues with the capital adequacy, and as to the estimates of the National Bank of Ukraine, how many banks will have problems with the capital as a result of the year, and how can National Bank of Ukraine influence this situation during wartime? Thank you for this question. We don't have, honestly, information, or I will not even comment it, because I'm the member of the board of the National Bank of Ukraine, and I can only comment information which is based on some verified data. The only thing I can say that today all the banks are operating. The National Bank controls the situation in full. Either it's a small bank or a systemically important bank, so we have full control of the banking system. And talking about those banks you mentioned, I cannot comment because I don't know what will be the decision taken in future, but expressing my own opinion, there is a large fraction of state-controlled bank which gives us opportunity to maintain to keep the financial defense, and the state-owned banks, they take huge part in realization of the state programs. Well, I mean the systematically important banks, we would call them the resilience banks, which may operate even during blackouts. But as to the banks you mentioned, those will be considered separately, and the decision will be taken later. So, and what's the position of our Western partners with regard to how should we operate the banking system? Should we reduce the number of state-owned banks, and how and under what circumstances? What's their stance on that? Look, we are currently in war. Again, this is my personal opinion. Before the war, it was easier. Each bank had a mission and a strategy. We could understand which bank would remain in owned by the state and which would be sold to the foreign investors or Ukrainian investors. Now, during the war, many of such processes are put on pause. I'm not saying that we should not consider those issues at all, but then we have to clearly realize that today any investor who wants to invest in our country, they would, well, the factor of the war would be one of the key factors influencing such investing decisions. So without, say, getting tied to the banking system, all the investors, even if they consider investing in our country, the most of them, I'm not saying that all of them, because some of them just already invest in the banking system, the most of them will see when the hot phase of the war will end. And there is the issue of regulating the war risks. It should be regulated for investors. For example, if the missile hits an installation, so the investor would want to get compensation for their losses. Thank you, Mr. Vasyl. One more question I would like to ask you. You said that inflation currently is about 27% in the country. About the purchasing parity power of Ukrainians, do we see that it fell? But according to your expert opinion, how much? Well, let's say that the individual purchasing power, it depends on inflation, and if there is a growth of salaries, for example, it's difficult to say now about the growth of salaries because we always operate the figures of our state institutions. That's why we don't have currently figures from the provided by the businesses. But again, there are some estimates by the National Bank and Ministry of Economy, and we would say that the forecast is about 30% for the next year, maybe 1 plus minus 1%, something around that. But again, we have a lot of factors that influence this rate, and I would like to draw your attention to, do you remember that 14-15 years banking crisis, the collapse of the banks? But we don't observe it currently because now National Bank has a lot of experience, plus the reforms in the banking sector and the professional actions of the National Bank with regard to fixation of the currency exchange rate, and again the support of our international partners. We have a lot of factors pressing on the banking system again and again. The government adopted the law which guarantees the deposits of the individuals 100%, and thanks to that the lending grew 35%. And one more question: was the dynamics in the cash currency market? Is the National Bank satisfied with those mechanisms? Did they work? I mean, the restrictions imposed by the National Bank recently. I will express my own opinion again. If not the war, for any central bank, the more non-cash operations, the better. But the war corrected a lot of things, including the cash payments within the last period. For example, for all the banks, if necessary, the national bank should provide any scale of any amounts of cash to the commercial banks. People should have no problems with it, and I think as the war ends, the people, the individuals, will proceed more to the non-cash payments because it's a normal European trend. But again, it's a war, so we have to keep our financial defense, and the national bank has a plan of actions for the banking system under conditions of blackout. There is a headquarters headed by the head of the National Bank of Ukraine. All the tasks and duties are fulfilled, and we see the banking system is operating, and I think that we will be able to keep operating 24/7 to keep our financial defense. Thank you for joining us. I'm reminding you, we had Vasyl Furmanm joining us, and our next briefing is at 1600. Mikita Potorai will be joining us, and we will be talking about the law on media, so bear with us. Trust in our armed forces. Glory to Ukraine.